Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hi, I'm Lily.
Science and Easy English. What if Earth's magnetic field flipped?
Yeah, that is the big question today.
It really is. And to kick off this deep dive, I want you, the listener, to just imagine something for a second. Imagine you're on a road trip, right? You're relying entirely on your phone's GPS.
Like we all do.
Exactly. But suddenly, it just reroutes you off the highway through a dense forest and straight into a lake.
Which would be terrifying.
Right. And at that exact same moment, hundreds of miles above your head, a multi-billion-dollar communications satellite violently shorts out, just goes completely dead in orbit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And halfway across the globe, a flock of migratory birds descends into absolute chaos, just circling aimlessly over an ocean they've navigated perfectly for millennia.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
It really does, but the wild thing is, this isn't a software glitch or a movie plot. This is the very real cascading effect of a structural failure in the massive invisible force field that surrounds our planet.
The magnetic field.
Exactly. So welcome to you, our fellow learner, joining us for today's deep dive. We've got a massive stack of sources today. We're talking 2026 satellite data, deep Earth supercomputer simulations, paleomagnetic rock records, and some brand new biospheric studies.
It's a really diverse stack of information.
It is. And our mission today is to unpack this invisible force field, figure out why the data shows it's currently, shifting and weakening, and answer that ultimate question: what actually happens to you, your technology, and life on Earth if the magnetic poles completely flip?
Right, and to really grasp the magnitude of a pole reversal, we kind of have to travel to the source first.
The engine room.
Yeah, exactly. The magnetic field isn't just some static magical bubble floating in the atmosphere. It's this active projection generated by a living engine deep inside the planet.
So we're talking way down.
Way down. If we go about 1,800 miles or 2,900 kilometers straight beneath our feet, we hit the Earth's core. And the very center is this solid inner nugget, mostly iron and nickel. And it's under so much pressure that it stays solid, even though it's basically as hot as the surface of the sun.
Which is just hard to even wrap your head around.
It is, and surrounding that solid nugget is the outer core, which is this vast, swirling ocean of superheated, molten liquid metal.
Right, and that intense heat from the solid inner core has to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So it radiates outward, heating the liquid metal at the bottom of the outer core.
Exactly. It's just like water boiling in a pot on your stove.
So that really hot liquid metal rises up toward the cooler mantle above it, cools down a bit, and then sinks back to the bottom to get heated all over again.
Creating these massive rolling convection currents.
Yeah, right. And because the Earth is always spinning, it twists those rising and falling currents into these really complex spiraling coils.
And that spiraling motion is the key to everything, because this molten iron and nickel is electrically conductive. So when you have a massive volume of electrically conductive fluid churning and spiraling like that, it generates electric currents. And moving electric currents, in turn, generate a magnetic field.
Okay, wait, I'm getting stuck on the iron part of this equation.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm picturing a giant ball of iron deep in the Earth, right? And iron is highly magnetic, so why isn't the Earth just a massive version of a permanent magnet, like the ones holding up grocery lists on my refrigerator? Why do we need all this boiling and churning?
That's a super common question. It actually all comes down to temperature. There's this threshold in physics called the Curie temperature.
The Curie temperature.
Yeah. When a magnetic material, like iron, gets too hot, the thermal energy causes its atoms to vibrate so violently that they physically can't maintain a permanent magnetic alignment anymore.
Oh, wow. So it just shakes the magnetism right out of it.
Basically, yeah. The core of the Earth is thousands of degrees beyond that Curie temperature. So the iron down there has completely lost its ability to hold a permanent magnetic charge.
So no giant permanent fridge magnet.
No giant fridge magnet. Instead, the Earth operates as an electromagnet. Think of those giant cranes you see at an auto wrecking yard. the ones hoisting crushed cars into the air.
Oh, right. Those massive metal discs on the cranes only become magnetic when the operator pumps a huge surge of electricity through a coil of wire inside them.
Exactly. Now, in the wrecking yard, that electricity comes from an external generator. But in the Earth's case, the outer core acts as both the generator and the electromagnet simultaneously.
Which is wild.
It is. It functions a lot like a spinning bicycle dynamo that powers a headlight. The whole system operates as this continuous, self-sustaining feedback loop.
So the flowing, spiraling liquid metal moves through an existing, weak magnetic field.
Yes.
And that movement generates stronger electric currents in the liquid, which then generate an even stronger magnetic field, which induces more current.
You've got it. The motion creates the current creates the field, and the field reinforces the entire engine.
It's just a brilliant self-sustaining loop. But looking at the data from our sources, this engine is not exactly running smoothly right now.
No, it's really not.
The warning lights on the planetary dashboard are basically flashing red. The field is actively drifting, and honestly, drifting feels like a massive understatement.
Oh, totally. It's sprinting.
Right. The North Magnetic Pole is currently racing away from the Canadian Arctic and sprinting right across the ocean towards Siberia. It's moving so fast that the world magnetic model has to be updated every 5 years.
And that model is incredibly important. It's the master map for global navigation.
Yeah, without those constant updates to correct for the shifting pole, commercial airline navigation, military targeting systems, and like we mentioned, the GPS in your phone, it would all just completely degrade. You'd be miles off course.
Which is a huge hazard. But the drifting pole is really only one symptom of a much larger disruption.
Right. There's the weak spot.
Yes. So the European Space Agency operates this constellation of satellites called SWARM, and they continuously monitor the magnetic field. They've been tracking this massive expanding weak spot called the South Atlantic Anomaly, or the SAA.
And since 2014, this specific weak spot over the South Atlantic Ocean has grown by an area half the size of continental Europe.
It's massive.
And the numbers measuring the intensity of this weak spot are kind of alarming. In the center of the anomaly, the magnetic field intensity has plummeted to just 22,094 nanoteslas.
Which might just sound like a random number to people.
Right, so to put that in perspective for you, a typical cheap magnet you'd buy at a souvenir shop has an intensity of 10 million nanoteslas.
Wow.
Yeah. So the planetary shield over the South Atlantic is astonishingly thin right now.
And the immediate consequence of that thinning shield is an influx of dangerous solar radiation.
Because there's nothing deflecting it.
Exactly. Low Earth orbit satellites and even astronauts aboard the International Space Station pass directly through this anomaly. And because the deflection is so weak there, highly charged particles from the sun just bombard their equipment.
Right. I read that when a high-energy particle strikes a computer chip on a satellite, it can physically flip a piece of data in the system's memory from a 0 to a 1.
Yeah, a single event upset. It can cause the electronics to short circuit or just crash the whole system entirely.
And for the astronauts.
For them, passing through the anomaly means absorbing higher doses of radiation, which significantly increases their long-term cancer risks.
Okay, so with the North Pole sprinting towards Siberia and this massive growing hole in our shield over the Atlantic, the natural conclusion here is that the whole system is breaking down, right?
It's easy to jump to that conclusion.
Does this mean the Earth is in the middle of a full magnetic pole reversal right now? Are we watching the flip happen in real time?
Well, the expansion of the anomaly is dramatic, definitely. But paleomagnetic records show that the Earth's field has actually developed massive weak spots like this many times in the past without ever progressing into a full reversal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what we're observing right now is more likely a severe decade to century timescale fluctuation in the field rather than, the beginning of the end.
Okay, so if we aren't experiencing a full reversal quite yet, something massive is still actively disrupting our engine room to cause a weak spot the size of a continent.
Absolutely. Something is jamming the gears.
And a 2026 study published in Nature Geoscience actually gives us the culprit. Scientists use these deep Earth supercomputer simulations to map the boundary between the Earth's molten liquid core and the solid rock mantle sitting just above it.
And what they found is wild.
They discovered massive, superheated solid rock formations sitting right at the base of the mantle, directly beneath Africa and the Pacific Ocean.
They call them large, low shear velocity provinces,
Right.
or LLSVPs.
Right. And to understand how a hot rock blob in the mantle destroys the magnetic field all the way up on the surface, we have to look back at how convection works.
Right, the boiling water analogy.
Exactly. For the liquid iron in the outer core to boil and spiral, it needs a drastic temperature difference. It needs a very hot floor to rise from, and a relatively cool ceiling to shed its heat before sinking back down.
But those massive rock formations act like giant heating pads placed right on the ceiling of the core.
Yes, because the ceiling in those specific areas is now superheated by the rock blobs, the temperature difference between the top and bottom of the liquid core just completely vanishes.
So the rising liquid iron hits that hot ceiling and has nowhere to transfer its heat.
Exactly. The boiling motion stalls, the liquid iron begins to stagnate. And because the dynamo requires that rigorous spiraling motion to generate the magnetic field,
The field generation simply dies in those specific regions.
the engine jams up from the bottom and a massive weak spot appears in the shield far above it.
And that disruption actually extends all the way out into near space, too.
Wait, really? How?
Well, there's a 2025 study from Kyoto University that analyzed the magnetosphere, which is the outer reaches of our magnetic bubble. And they found this shocking twist in the electric field.
Okay, what kind of twist?
So, the standard model of physics assumed the morning side of Earth's magnetic bubble was positively charged, and the evening side was negatively charged, which would dictate a smooth flow of electric forces.
Right, that makes sense.
But the satellite data proved the exact opposite. The morning side is actually negative,
Wait, it's backwards.
entirely backwards, and the mechanics behind that flip are wild. Solar wind, which is basically a continuous stream of charged plasma shooting out from the sun, slams into the Earth's magnetic field lines.
Okay.
The physical friction of that solar plasma violently dragging against our upward and downward magnetic field lines forces the electrical charge to literally flip at the equator.
So it's like discovering the engine of your car is somehow being controlled by the shape of the passenger seats above it, while the headlights are wired completely backward.
That is a perfect analogy. The deep Earth rock blobs are stalling the core from below, and the solar wind is ripping at the outer edges from above. It just proves how incredibly chaotic this entire system is.
It really does. So to figure out if this chaotic system is eventually going to lead to a pole flip, we have to look at the Earth's history, right?
Exactly. And we can actually read the rocks to see what the magnetic field was doing millions of years ago.
Through paleomagnetism.
Right. Down on the ocean floor, at places like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, tectonic plates are constantly pulling apart. Fresh, incredibly hot liquid lava oozes up from the Earth's interior to fill the gap.
And that hot lava is packed with iron-rich minerals.
Yes. And while the lava is still in its liquid state, those tiny iron minerals act like microscopic, free-floating compass needles. They physically rotate and align themselves with whatever the Earth's current magnetic field direction is at that exact moment.
And then the freezing deep ocean water washes over the lava, flash freezing it into solid rock.
Going back to that Curie temperature, as the rock rapidly cools below that threshold, those tiny magnetic needles become permanently locked into place.
Wow.
And because the ocean floor is constantly spreading outward, pushing older rock aside as new lava erupts over millions of years, this creates a massive physical tape recorder spreading across the bottom of the sea.
So by measuring the alignment of the iron in the rock as you move away from the ridge, scientists can see these distinct zebra stripes stretching across the ocean floor.
Exactly. One stripe of rock will show the iron needles pointing north, while the very next stripe shows them pointing completely south.
And the sheer volume of data locked in those rocks proves that the Earth has flipped its magnetic poles at least 183 times over the last 83 million years.
Which averages out to roughly one flip every 200,000 to 300,000 years.
Okay, but wait. The most recent major flip, the Brunhes-Matsuyama reversal, occurred 780,000 years ago.
Right.
So if the mathematical average is a reversal every 200,000 to 300,000 years, and the rocks prove the last one was nearly 800,000 years ago, that math is terrifying. Aren't we massively overdue for a catastrophic pole flip? Like, the tension on this system must be at a breaking point.
I know, the numbers certainly make it feel like a ticking time bomb. But the geodynamo engine does not operate on a strict mechanical schedule.
It doesn't.
No, it is a wildly random, self-contained, and highly chaotic system. There's no tension building up behind a dam, and there is really no such thing as being overdue for a reversal.
Really?
Yeah, because the system possesses no memory of how long it's been since the last flip. It is literally a roll of the dice every single day.
So sometimes the core rolls the dice and just flip-flops incredibly fast.
Exactly. The field dips in strength, the poles start to wander, but the dynamo quickly reverts back to its original polarity without ever regaining full power. The paleomagnetic rocks show this happened all the time during the Jurassic period.
But then other times, the core rolls the dice and gets completely locked into one polarity for an incomprehensible amount of time.
Right, like during the Cretaceous normal superchron, the magnetic field remained perfectly stable without a single flip for 37 million years.
That contrast is just staggering. Between 37 million years of total stability and periods of rapid-fire flip-flops, it really highlights the profound unpredictability of the core.
It does. But eventually, whether it happens tomorrow morning or 100,000 years from now, the inevitable will occur. The poles will reverse again.
But the physical flipping process doesn't just happen overnight like a disaster movie, right?
No, it takes thousands of years to complete. And the magnetic field doesn't just vanish into the vacuum of space either.
Okay, what does it do?
The strength of the shield drops by about 90%. And as the single strong dynamo in the core fractures, the simple two-pole system we navigate by today will basically shatter.
Shatter into what?
Into a messy, highly complex web of multiple north and south poles popping up randomly all over the globe.
Wow. But operating with a shield at only 10% capacity? That's a staggering drop, especially for a modern society that's entirely dependent on technology.
Oh, absolutely. Without the full strength of the field to deflect them, solar storms and cosmic radiation would wreak absolute havoc on our infrastructure.
And we actually have a historical precedent for this.
Yeah.
In 1859, a massive solar storm known as the Carrington event slammed into the Earth.
Right.
One of the sources from a heliobiology community detailed these historical records from telegraph operators during the storm. The telegraph stations literally caught on fire.
Yes. And those fires were caused by geomagnetically induced currents.
How does that work?
Well, when a massive wave of charged solar energy hits a weakened magnetic field, it causes the Earth's field to fluctuate wildly. These changing magnetic fields physically push electrons through long, electrically conductive structures on the ground.
Generating massive spikes of uncontained power.
Exactly. In 1859, those structures were telegraph wires. The induced currents pulled straight out of the fluctuating atmosphere were so incredibly strong that operators disconnected their batteries and just continued sending messages using only the raw electrical surges hitting their lines.
That is insane. So if a 90% drop in the magnetic field during a reversal allowed a similar solar storm to hit us today, it would be catastrophic.
Completely. We aren't just dealing with primitive telegraph wires anymore.
Right. Modern civilization is this intricate web of delicate electronics and massive transmission lines. Thousands of low Earth orbit satellites would be instantly fried, crippling global communications and the internet.
And down here on the ground, those geomagnetically induced currents would surge through our sprawling power grids. They'd melt the massive transformers that step down electricity for our homes.
So we'd be looking at sustained global power grid blackouts that could take years to repair.
Yeah, the technological devastation is a grim reality, but we do need to separate the technology from biology here.
Because a common fear is that without the magnetic shield, the influx of cosmic rays would just fry life on Earth. Right, like we'd be forced to build underground bunkers to survive.
Right, but the reality is that our physical atmosphere is incredibly thick and robust.
Okay.
Even with the magnetic field operating at only a fraction of its normal strength, the atmosphere itself acts as a massive physical barrier against the deadliest incoming cosmic radiation.
So stepping outside to walk to the grocery store during a pole reversal isn't going to cause a person to spontaneously combust.
No, no bunkers needed. The atmosphere takes the brunt of the hit.
But biology doesn't escape a reversal completely unscathed, does it?
Far from it. While the atmosphere stops the catastrophic cosmic rays, a significantly weakened magnetic field allows an increased amount of ultraviolet or UV radiation to penetrate all the way to the surface.
And prolonged exposure to high levels of UV radiation causes cellular damage and DNA mutations.
Right. But looking through the lens of deep time, this radiation acts less like a mass extinction event and more like a massive global evolutionary driver.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. The sudden introduction of environmental stress and increased genetic mutation rates actually forces life to adapt. It rapidly drives speciation and incredible biological innovation.
So the shield dropping isn't a death sentence for life. It acts as a fast-forward button for evolution.
Exactly. But the biological impact goes even deeper than just radiation exposure.
Yeah, one of the most fascinating biospheric studies in our stack looked at how living mammals respond to the physical absence of a magnetic field in real time.
The mice study.
Yeah. Researchers placed mice inside a specialized chamber that generated a hypomagnetic or nearly non-existent magnetic field, simulating the environment of a prolonged pole reversal.
And the results of that study showed that the mice suffered significant impairments in adult hippocampal neurogenesis.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the hippocampus is the region of the brain responsible for memory, learning, and spatial navigation. And neurogenesis is the biological process of growing new neurons. When deprived of the Earth's normal magnetic field, the physical growth of new brain cells in the mice was stunted. Their ability to learn and process new information was biologically impaired, simply because the invisible force field around them was turned off.
Wow. That concept completely reframes our relationship with the planet.
It really does.
Like, a pole reversal wouldn't just crash our modern power grids and scramble our satellites. Our own biology, down to the cellular level of how our brains generate neurons and form memories, is intimately, fundamentally anchored to the invisible magnetic shield being generated by a swirling ocean of liquid iron 1,800 miles beneath our feet.
The geodynamo is not just a geological curiosity buried in the dark, It's deeply, physically woven into the daily survival and evolutionary future of life on this planet.
We have covered massive ground today.
We really have.
We started deep in the engine room, breaking down how the intense heat of the inner core drives the convection and spiraling currents of liquid metal to generate our magnetic shield.
And then we looked at the dashboard and saw the warning lights flashing the North Pole, sprinting across the Arctic, and that massive growing weak spot over the South Atlantic anomaly, letting radiation bleed through to our satellites.
We discovered the hidden rock blobs, those LLSVP formations, sitting in the deep mantle, stalling the convection currents, and jamming up our engine room.
We looked down at the ocean floor to read the zebra stripes of Paleomagnetic rock, revealing a chaotic history of unpredictable pole flips that refuse to adhere to any mathematical schedule.
And we explored the incredibly complex consequences of the next inevitable reversal. From the absolute devastation of our modern electrical grid through induced currents, paired with the surge in evolutionary biological innovation driven by atmospheric radiation.
We've examined the core, the satellites, and the DNA mutations. But there is one final consequence of a shattered magnetic field that demonstrates just how interconnected this planet is.
Right. Think about the animals. We know that countless species, from massive blue whales and sea turtles to millions of migratory birds, rely entirely on the Earth's magnetic field to navigate the globe.
It's their internal biological GPS system.
Exactly. So if a reversal takes thousands of years to complete, and the primary shield drops by 90%, while simultaneously spawning this chaotic web of multiple north and south poles scattered randomly across the continents, the animal kingdom will face unprecedented navigational chaos.
It would be total confusion.
Right. Will a flock of birds flying south for the winter suddenly latch onto a new, temporary magnetic pole that leads them deep into the Sahara Desert? Will we see entirely new global migration routes forged in real time as species desperately follow a fracturing magnetic web?
It could create a completely different map of global biodiversity.
The shifting magnetic field isn't just a threat to our technology. It might be the secret architect guiding the movement and evolution of life on Earth.
It's a profound realization. It challenges our entire perception of stability and just shows how much we still have to learn about the dynamic living system operating beneath us.
So keep looking down, keep looking up, and keep questioning everything around you. Until next time, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.